Hey guys, hi, it's Keith Baker from Dusty Attic Studio, and today we are going to be mixing another song start to finish. I'm going to break this one down to two separate tutorials, a part one and part two. We're first going to start with the drums, percussions, and bass, and then the second part of the video will be the instruments and the vocals. Doesn't have a whole lot of tracks. Um, Quite frankly, I don't even know how many tracks it has. It looks like it's 19 tracks. I'm not sure of the genre. It's kind of a pop, country, even with a little bit of bluegrass kind of aspect to it, since it has some mandolin in it. It's also got horns, so I guess you could even throw in a little jazz or smooth jazz kind of mixed in there. So anyway, it's got a kind of a melting pot of everything. So anyway, let me tell you a little bit of what I'm using here. I'm going to switch over to my desk so you can take a quick look at it. I am using the Studio Live Series 3 24 console mixer. I will be using DAW mode. I'll go ahead and click that now. And you can see you got the flying faders going on there. I use a monitor station. I just couldn't, monitor station 2, I just can't live without that thing. It just is awesome piece of gear, and including the Series 3. It's just unbelievable. Up here on the wall, I have a 43-inch display. Just makes it a little bit easier for me to see with these old eyes. But anyway, let me go ahead and switch over to my screen capture. And what we got here, like I said, it's 19 tracks. This is a song that was recorded live at Telefunken Labs. So it's live, everything's live drums, and there is quite a bit of bleed through everything, but we're going to work through that. The song has a tempo of 110 dB, 110 beats per minute. And I pretty much got everything all set up and ready to go. I've got my tracks colored the way that I like them to be. I've already got my start and end marker set. You do that by clicking the little flag up here. That'll have to be set ultimately, that or the loop, which I'll click on and off. You can see at the top turning on and off, or when you do your exporting, when you render it down to an MP3 or a WAV file, whatever the case may be. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started on these drums. I'm going to start first, as I always do. I go through and I mute everything, and then unmute them as I go. So we're going to start with the kick drum here. Let's see, it's got a compressor and EQ on there. Thought I took all that off, because this is a song I probably mixed, I'm guessing about 9 or 10 months ago. It's a cool song, so I thought it would be good to use as a tutorial. If you guys get a chance, please hit the subscribe button. I do this for free, and I'm just trying to get some more subscribers and views. And I hope all my videos you find helpful in one way or another. Everybody's got their own way of doing things. This is just my way. So you're going to find your workflow. This video is going to be probably more on the intermediate range instead of just a flat out beginner. Since I'm breaking it down to 2 videos, I'll be able to spend a little more time explaining everything I do and why I do it. without actually going into like a 2-hour tutorial, a single 2-hour tutorial. So if you're just looking to figure to learn how to mix live drums, maybe you won't even need to watch the second part of this. But there's a lot of tips that you might pick up along the way. So I recommend checking out both part 1 and part 2. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the kick drum. And I'm going to go ahead and play that. Let's see what it sounds like raw. Sounds kind of like a typical live drum kick. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do, I do bring in presets only to speed up the process. Click my browser here, just so I don't. Although the workflow of Studio One is just absolutely incredible with having the drag and drop plugins, but this way I can just bring in what I need quickly. By hitting this little arrow here, and I'm going to hit drums, and I'm going to go to a rock kick. And as you see, it already brings in my compressor, and it brings in an EQ, which is typically what I'm going to be using throughout this tutorial in practically every track. So we brought that in, so let's take a listen what it sounds with and without, with just the stock Studio One preset. Without, and then I'm going to turn it on. As I've always said many times before, it's just very dramatic. The guys over at Personas, engineers over there, did a really good job of getting presets, so it gets you close. First thing I notice here is that it's a little hot. There's probably, they did some makeup gain on the compressor, but I'm gonna go ahead and pull this down. I really mix at low levels. I'm not talking about so much the headphones or the studio monitors. I mix at all different levels there, which I'm going to remind you right away. You shouldn't mix, exclusively in headphones. You should always use your studio monitors, because I have an open mic. I'm really kind of left with no choice but to use headphones. But there's going to be a couple times through this tutorial that I will turn the mic off and take the headphones off, just to make sure that things are sounding just the way they're supposed to. So let me go ahead and get back to this. As you can see, I got my kick drum kind of, let me loop a spot here. As you can see, I got it hovering right around negative 12 dB, which is where you'd want to record it anyway. When you add plugins, it can boost the level. But again, I mix really low levels because I like to have lots of headroom at the end when I do my mastering. All right, so let's go ahead and go in here and take a look and see what this compressor is doing. It's hitting it pretty hard. They got a ratio of 4:1. And the knee is just a little over 10.5. They got an attack of 129 milliseconds, and it's holding it for 1.23 milliseconds. The fact of the matter is I typically use something, an attack and release setting similar to this, and I'll show you why. Really, it's because so you can really get that initial attack of the beater on the kick. So I'm going to go ahead and show you real quick. I'm going to take this attack and I'm going to take it all the way down to nothing, and then that way the compressor is actually reacting instantly, and you'll see it's going to take away some of the pop. See, now it doesn't sound quite as aggressive, but I don't want to take that much out of it. So I'm going to pull this thing up until I hear what I'm listening for, which is a nice clean attack, but controlled. And here it comes. So right around 100 milliseconds, I'm getting what I want from the attack. I'm going to leave the release as long as it is, because it really helps control those rumbling sounds that kind of stays in the kick, and I want them to kind of be controlled there. Now I'm going to leave the 4:1 ratio, but I'm going to come here and I'm going to turn some of the threshold down or up, because I think it's hitting it just a little bit too hard. I do know that this song, the guy a couple times hits really hard with his foot, so I'm gonna leave it crushing it pretty good, which is giving me a reduction from just over 3 dB. So I'm good there. Now I'm gonna switch over to the EQ. Since we're just doing the drums and the bass and the percussions in this thing, that really is going to be what builds your bottom end of the song. So what I'm going to do here with the kick is I'm going to use these low ends for the very deepest part of the bottom end, and so I'm going to keep it pushed up somewhere around here in the 50 hertz area, because when I bring in the bass guitar, I'm going to have that cover somewhere between the 100 and 200 range. That way they're not fighting for space. Okay, so let's take a close look at this. They got this high shelf one here to try and bring out some of the highs. And then they got this bump right here around 5K, which is really to give that kick drum that snap sound. So I'm going to pull that out for a second because it may be a little too much. I want some of it in there, so that's too much. Okay, I like the attack. I'm going to come over here on my high pass filter, and I'm going to low cut that. I'm going to go ahead and do it a real hard cut. But I'm only going to have it so it comes over here in the, in the 20, 30. Let's put it around the 30 hertz, because really everything below 40, even though it's still grabbing some of the 40, it is really just adding mud to your kick or to your mix in general. So you want it to get all those low frequencies cleaned up, and you'll see me do this throughout the video, just to get rid of those low unwanted frequencies. All right, so I'm going to play around with this around 50, like I said, 50 hertz. It's kind of my standard, and I'm going to change this Q, widen it out just a hair. So I'm giving it a pretty good boost. I mean, 12 dB at 50, but you can hear that it's given a nice warm kick along with that snap that you're getting from that 5K. These high mids that are pulled out, I typically leave that, or I might move it around a little bit. What I'm trying to do with that there, and what the engineers at Personas have done, is this range in typical kick drums, if you don't pull some of that out, you're going to get kind of a boxy sound. And I'm just trying to get that out of there. So I'm happy with that. So, and you know, once I get the drums all mixed, I'm sure I'm going to go back there and make other little tweaks in the EQ and maybe even in some of the compression. You know, and when I get the bass in there, that's going to give me more of an idea of exactly what needs to be changed. And then, you know, I'll stop the video there, and then we'll go on to part 2, and then we'll start bringing in the instruments. And even then, I'll probably have to go in and make changes to the drums. I'm going to put a bus on these drums ultimately, and I'm going to be using a third-party plug, and treat the whole kit, the kit as a whole, kind of glue it together and do some other aspects of you know, sonically and dynamically. So I have a pretty good idea what that's going to do. So I'm really kind of doing things here, just getting it close. So, all right, now let's go ahead and move over to the snare. I'm going to go ahead and solo that. And I can already tell you that's too hot. And I'm going to open this up. Again, this is my, you know, this is my workflow. You know, some people like to have it, their faders thin like this, and then you double click or the track and opens up, or some people like to have it like this, and some people like to have it with their plugins, you know, up top. You know, when I started using Studio One back in the day, this was the way that I learned, and this is just how I kept my workflow. Having a big display, you know, gives you plenty of real estate, so I don't mind having the fatter tracks. That, and it's easier for me to see. So anyway, let's go ahead and go back up to our presets again. Again, I'm not necessarily using them. It's only to bring in what I need quickly, and then I'll go in and I'll make the changes. Go to drums, and I'm going to go to a rock snare. Where I find it, there it is. And right off the bat, I can hear how that's getting too much of a high-end sizzle. But let's take a look at this compressor. They use a 2-to-1 ratio. I'm actually going to bump that up because I know to about 3-to-1. I'm okay with the knee. As a matter of fact, I'm going to take that down to 6. I want it to hit fast. I'm going to bring this attack down. So I hear exactly how I want that impact of the stick to sound. And it looks like right around 11 milliseconds is doing it. The release, I'm actually going to back off that. This drum doesn't have a whole lot of tone to it. I can't remember if it's a steel drum or a wood shell. I would guess that it's a wood shell. I want to leave some of that in there. So I'm going to pull this back to about 120. And let's see what's going on with the threshold here. I really don't think it was necessary to be, you know, hitting it with, you know, have 8 or 9 dB of reduction. So I'm going to push this back up. Plus I want to be able to hear those snares on the bottom, as I do not have a bottom snare mic. Okay, I'm cool with that. Let's go over to the EQ. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set this to default. I am going to roll everything off around 150. Let's see, around 150 hertz. Now you can see here that right here around the 200 range, 190, 180, that pretty much represents the tone, or what the shell is the sound of. I'm going to enhance that a little bit. So you hear a little bit more of the drum. Now what I'm going to do is come over here somewhere between the 2 and 5K range, and I'm going to give it a little boost to try and get, because right now it sounds a little flat. So let's take a listen. And you got to be careful on exactly how high you go as far as your kilohertz, is that you can hear that hi-hat in there is bleeding through, and you don't want to really enhance that. But I'm going to push it over here so we can see what happens. I mean, I do like the way that sounds, but I'm afraid that that hi-hat may be bleeding through so much that it's going to affect the mix of the rest of the drums. So I'm going to pull this back over to the 5K range. And I'm pushing it up about 9.5 dB of gain. I'm going to leave it right there for now, because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to give this snare drum some space by adding a reverb. I'm going to use the stock reverb, the mix verb. I use that exclusively for snare drums. Now I'm going to grab that, drag it over to my send, because I want it to be stereo. And the first thing I'm going to do is add a little more size, but I'm going to take some of the dampness out of it. I'm going to unlock this, and I'm going to pull out down to around 50% for the moment. Now I'm going to add some pre. I find that between 25, 35 milliseconds works well. So let's take it up around 30. And that really gave some nice room there. Let me give this a little bit. That snare, that reverb may sound a little exaggerated, but once the rest of the drums and the music's mixed in, you're going to lose some of that. Let me play with the size and the dampness here. And the size. Right there sounds pretty good. But I lost a little bit of the high end. So I'm going to go back into my EQ. And I think I'm going to start looking for a sweet spot somewhere in the 2 to 3K range, just to bring that snap out a little bit more without putting too much of the hi-hat in. Okay, that's not so bad. Let's take a listen to it with the kick. I'll get these levels balanced out after I get the rest of the kit in there. Sounds like a lot of reverb, but like I said, that will, I mean, I may pull some of it out, but once the rest of the kit's put together, it's probably going to lose some of that. Okay. Let's move on over to that hi-hat. I'm going to take this reverb here and I'll move it off to the left, get it out of the way. If you're unable to move your FX buses or your regular buses or your VCAs, whatever, you can come up here and hit this little wrench and you can uncheck these. If you prefer them to be all the way to the right, just leave them checked. Okay, so, and by the way, this is where you colorize your channel strips if you want them to be colorized. All right, let's bring in the hi-hats. First, let me solo it. I'm going to open that channel and go to my presets, drums, hi-hat. It's got an expander in there that I'm not going to use on that. Oof, that's hard on the ears. Okay, again, it's just a simple way to bring in your compressor and your EQ. As you can see, the compressor isn't even hitting the hi-hat. What it is doing is it's hitting the snare. I'm going to bump this up to about 3.5 to 1 compression. I'm going to leave that knee real tight. I'm going to see if yanking it way down here like this, it's going to take a little bit of that snare out, because I'm really only interested in the hi-hat. Let me play with this attack. You can slowly hear the snare disappearing. Won't be able to get rid of it all, but as long as it's below the original snare, we're okay. But I may have pulled too much of the hi-hat out, so let me push this up just a hair. Okay, that's better. They have the release at 160. I'm going to leave that there. All right, let me move on over to the EQ. First thing I'm going to do is set this to default. And when you hear that, you can hear all the kick drums start to come in. Let me turn this up. So what am I going to do? I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do my high pass filter, and I am going to cut pretty much everything up to the mids. And that lows in that kick drum pretty much disappears. I'm also going to come over here and do a high cut or a low pass filter and cut all that out. Now I'm going to try and make those hi-hats sound good. I want to be able to hear them, but I don't want them, all up in your face. Let me change this cut. Well, let's see what that sounds like with the kick and the snare. I'm also going to pan this hi-hat a little bit to the left. I'm gonna mix these drums from the drummer's perspective. Not much. Maybe around 12, that'll work. Something else I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same reverb I used on the snare on the hi-hat. I want them to be the same. Now, that's pretty in your face. So since both these reverbs are on one FX bus, I'm using one instance of reverb, which is good down the line if you have a slower computer and you need to save space. But I can come over here and grab this and pull some of that out. It'll be the same reverb, it just won't be as much in the mix. I want a little bit. I want it airy. Okay, now let me turn that down. And I'm good with that. Okay. Now let's go to the ride cymbal. I just got to find a place in the song where I can loop that. right there. Woo. I'm going to loop it there so we can play with this ride. And I'm going to go to drums. I don't think they have one for a ride. So you know what I'm going to do? I am going to pull in an overhead. Excuse me. Bring in the overheads, which of course made it way worse. I was wishful thinking there. And I am going to use about a 4-to-1 ratio on this ride. I think I'm going to put this knee up to around 6. It's close enough. And let's, I'm going to bring the attack down to about 12 to 15. And I may hold it longer than 170 once I start getting some reduction. Let's see. Okay, we'll leave that there, and we're going to see if we can't clean the rest of it up with the EQ. And that's hot. First thing I'm going to do, put this back to default. I'm going to roll all this off again. And let's go ahead and do a low pass here. 100% there. Waiting for my loop. Here we go. And we'll let you hear it with and without. That's without the EQ. And that's with the EQ. Let's bring it in with the rest of the kit. Let's see what changes have to be made. I'm going to pan it to the right since we're doing drummer perspective. Now you don't want to crank it all the way to one side. That's just ridiculous. I'm going to be using a stereo imager on my master, so I'm actually going to pan it really light at the moment. It's driving me crazy. That sounds good. And these levels will be changed again. Okay, so we got our tom-toms here. Let's find a spot. Find a spot where we got some tom hits. So working on the rack one. Let's go down here. Let me stop this for a second. Go down here and spread that out just a little bit. I'm just grabbing the timeline up here, and you can move it up and down. Kind of zooming into that space, and let's hear what's going on there with that rack tom. Sounds like he's just doing a flam there, but that's a good enough spot to get this close. So I'm going to loop this part here. And as I've said many times, this is the worst part of being an audio engineer. Just having to loop one spot over and over and over. It drives you crazy, but that's what you get if this is what you choose to do. All right. Let's open up our channel, go to our presets, go to our drums, and I'm going to go to a rack tom. and you already hear an incredible difference. Let me stretch that out a little further. You can hear that drum is ringing quite a bit. So this has an expander. This time I'm going to use it. The expander is kind of like a gate, but you can control how slow, how fast it reacts. And you let me do extreme here, so you can see what I'm talking about. You can hear that. You don't want that. You want some of the tone to ring out. I mean, you want it to sound natural. And that's not going to do it, so let's bring this threshold out a little bit. No. I changed my mind. Let's work on this ratio. There you go. And I'm going to be adding that same snare reverb to these toms too, so I'm going to take that into consideration. And I like that. Let's take a look at the compressor. 3-to-1 is good for me. I'm getting about 2 dB of reduction. I'm probably going to leave that right now because we really don't know what's going to happen when he hits that tom again in another space. He might hit it harder, he might hit it lighter, but this sounds pretty good. I'm good with about a 30 millisecond attack, and I am going to increase that up to 200 on the release. All right, let's take a look at the EQ. First thing I'm going to do is cut all this out here, probably somewhere in the 70 hertz. I'm getting rid of that mud. I know the bass guitar is going to be hovering around in this area too, so I got to be careful. Now, what I do with toms is I actually look what it's asking for. You can see this, and Personas just happened to hit this one right on the head. You can see this at the 140 hertz. You can see that it wants that. Now you got to ask yourself, is that drum sound thin, or is it too fat? Do you need to add more? Do you need to pull more out of there? To me, this drum sounds a little thin. So I'm going to click this back on, listening to the difference, so you really start to hear the tone out of the wood. Might be a little much. Pull it down just a hair. I'm going to leave these high mids out, and this little shelf here is basically for to give you the stick attack. So let me take that off and see if it makes it better or worse. Kind of loses a little bit of that velocity, doesn't it? You don't have to answer me. Okay, so let me put that back in. I might even raise it a hair. There, that sounds pretty good right there. Again, these will be changed. I'm just getting them close. All right, so I'm sure those volume levels are going to have to come down. Let's now, again, we are going to drummer perspective. I mean, this is a one rack, one floor kit. Typically, would you just leave that one rack tom sitting in the middle? But I do like to have it. I do like to have that nice little, like when he does a fill, to hear it go from the left to the right. So I'm going to pull that out just a hair, maybe around 12. Again, when I put that stereo imager on the master, that's going to spread things out a little more. So I'm being kind of conservative on how far I spread things out. And just so you know up front that the stereo imager that I'm going to use on the master is a free one by Isotope. It's called the Ozone Stereo Imager. Studio One, if you're using Artist and you can't bring in third-party plugs, Studio One Artist has a binaural pan. I believe that's what it's. I don't use them, so if it's not the binaural pan, they do have a stereo imager. There you can spread things out. I'm not going to slow this video down to go looking for it right now, but if you guys go through, you'll probably find it. So I'm good with that tom. I'm going to take this and crank it up just a little bit more. This is, by the way, so I'm not raising the levels. I'm just making the wave files a little more visible. I'm going to go through here. I can see this because I'm going to move on over to my floor tom, and I can see there's some slow hits on there. Let me see if we can find one where he's actually here's one where he actually does something with the floor tom. I'm gonna loop that out. I'm going to solo it, set my loop there, and let's go. Okay, this one needs a lot of help. I'm going to go back to my presets. I'm going to go to, they have a floor tom. Okay. Because it's so thin and I really can't hear everything, I'm going to leave the expander alone right now because it sounds like it's ringing out nice. Probably way too long at the moment, but let's, I'm going to go to my EQ first. You can see that this thing is looking for tone in this spot here. I mean, that already sounds better. Let me pull some of about 50 hertz on down to get rid of the mud. And maybe move this up. It's not too bad. I can hear that a little bit better now. Turn it up a hair. That's not too bad. May have that velocity or that attack a little too much. There we go. All right, let's take a look at the EQ, the compressor. And it's not even touching it. I like the 3-to-1. I'm okay with, I'm gonna bump that up to close to 200 on the release. I'm good with around the 30 attack. Let's pull this threshold down. I don't want to get too carried away because I know he doesn't use the floor tom that much in this song. This is probably the hardest he hits it, so I'm just going to kiss it with the with compression. Now let's get rid of some of that ring with this expander. Bring that up to about 21, and then start tightening in. There we go. Sounds a little more controlled there. Went too far. Okay. It's still a little thin sounding. Let me go back to this EQ and see if there's anything else I can do. Maybe I can bring over and add a little bit more low mids. That helped a little bit. But we'll see how it sounds with the whole mix. This is a floor tom, so drummer perspective, I'm going to put this over to about 50 at the moment. Don't forget that stereo imager is going to pull that out a little further. Now let's listen to all that together. too bad. Now, remember I said I was going to put the same reverb that I had on the snare on the two toms. I'm going to do that now. You see, I'm just dragging them over. I'm still using a single instance of reverb. Now let's see what that sounds like. Pull a little bit out of it because I can hear some unwanted frequencies. That's better. Now let's see if I can find a spot where there is the tom, both toms hitting. Like right here, let's see. Okay, so that's too much reverb in both of them. So I'm going to pull that back, and I'm going to do the same to this. I want the effect. I don't so much want it to, you know, take up so much space. Let me loop that so I can get those levels kind of set. Leave it just like that for now. Okay, let's, we got a room mic here. And it's a mono one. So let me, let's solo that and see what that's all about. Sounds more like a single overhead. Maybe it's kind of out front. Because I just realized there's no overheads on this. Wow. So, okay, well, let's do this. Give it a little loop here, just so it'll keep rolling. And I'm going to treat it as an overhead. So let's go to drums. Overheads. Oh, it's painful. First thing I'm going to do is go into this EQ, and there is a different preset in here that I like that gets you close. We go into drums, and I think there we go. It's good. Turn on my third. Let me cut this all out. Take some of the crispiness out of it. Might have to pull some more of this out on this high pass. Because I do want some of this kick. I want to use it to try and give it some room sound, some ambient to it. Because we're going to blend this in ever so slightly by, I mean, we don't have a choice but to use this for the crash cymbals, so I'm kind of gearing it more towards there, but we might be able to use some of the other drum tones that are flying out of there. Bring it down here and let's bring it in slowly. Doesn't sound too bad. With the exception of we've got cymbals crashing all in the center, except for the bleed in the other mics. All right, for now, I'm just going to go ahead and leave that. I don't want to get too deep into it. And I'm going to select all of my drums. I'm gonna hit Control and just select them individually. You can hit Shift, select the first one and the last one. I'm not going to do that because I have a switch box because I have several computers on this monitor, keyboard, and mouse, and the trigger to switch between them is the Shift key. I got to figure out how to change that. You have to hit it twice, but still sometimes I'll be in the middle of a mix and I'll press Shift for something and it'll switch to a different computer. Okay, well anyway, I have them all selected. I'm going to right click and I'm going to add a bus for selected channels. That way everything is going to a bus. I'm going to go ahead and select them all one more time. And then I'm going to add a VCA fader. And then, of course, I'm going to put that at the end of my chain. VCA fader is nothing more than it moves everything together relevant, but still allows you to go in here and make individual changes. So easy, 1, 2, 3, put that back. All right. Because once I get this the way I want it to sound, you know, and then get the rest of the mix in there, I may want all the drums up the same, or I may want to bring them down. But first, let me go on over to my bus, and I'm going to bring in my third-party plug-in, which is one of my favorites for drums, and it's the Nomad Magma. Bring that over here. This is a rack. It's got all kinds of plugins built into it, 50, 60 of them. I can't remember exactly how many they are. You know, you can add them by clicking here. And this gives you a pretty good idea of what you got in here. All kinds of stuff, but I'm not going to do that. There's a preset that's in here for drums. It's got presets for all kinds of stuff that get you close. And I'm going to use the drum enhancer. This rack is very similar to the Slate virtual mix rack. It's just Nomad's version of it. Let's see. So let me go ahead and hit the drum enhancer. It brings in several things here, and you know, you're not just limited to 4 rack spaces. You got this particular one does only use 4 U's, but you can have plenty of rack space if you want to use a bunch of plugins. First, this right here is only to analyze your EQ of what's going on in that channel. It's kind of hard to read. I'm going to leave it on there, but I don't typically pay attention to it because I end up putting another EQ at the end of it anyway, which let me just go ahead and do that now. And really, it's just so I can see what's going on after this plugin. So here at the top is basically an exciter. The next one down in the chain is a tube, a vacuum tube compressor emulator. And then here I have a limiter. All this is going to add the limiter and the compressor, going to add some glue. This up here, the Claritone harmonic enhancer, which is, you know, really just an exciter. This allows you to build the subs and tune the subs, so how full you want the kit to sound. And this here, the easiest way to explain what the clarifier clarity is it's like right around 5K, where you can crank up and, you know, make it brighter or bring it down some without adding too much sizzle, like if you were to go to an EQ and just crank up on 5, 6, 7K. Anyway, let me bring this loop over. It's it's a big plug-in. It really takes up a lot of space. I'm going to bypass this first because I want to hear you the before and after, just with the presets. And then I'll go in and I'll make some changes. So this is what we got on the drums. Okay, let me turn this on. It does have like a 4 dB push on this limiter, so it's gonna increase the volume, but don't let the volume, you know, trick your ears into thinking that, wow, it sounds better because it's louder, because that's not necessarily the case. Ready? Go. That's some pretty incredible stuff right there. So first thing I see what I got to do here is come in here and turn this kick down a little bit. Okay, I'm cool with that now. Let me go in here and make some changes. I'll show you what I meant about this clarity. That's nice. Let's see what I got going on this compressor. It's really hitting the kick mostly. And, you know, just bringing it in, even if you set everything to 0 and it's not actually even touching, it still brings that element of a tube sounding, you know, like you have transformer emulators to make it sound analog, and then you have vacuum tube compressors. I mean, just bringing it in without it doing anything tends to give it a warmer analog sound. All right, so let me continue to play that. The kick drum still might be a little loud, but you know, we'll get deeper into that once we get into the mix, the rest of the mix. I'm bringing it down. I kind of like kick drums to be in your face. What is my attack? My release? It's good because this is a bus compressor. Attack doesn't have to be that much. All right, there we go. I'm cool with that. So for now, I'm going to call these drums done until we get all the instruments and the vocals in, which is what I'm going to do on part 2 of this video. All right, so we have 2 percussion tracks. If I'm not mistaken, I think they're just bongos. So let's take a listen to those. Yep. So what I'm going to do is spread these out just a hair. Turn them down. And one thing about me is I consider myself a minimalistic engineer. I mean, to me, less is more. Quite frankly, I like the way these things sound just the way they are. I'm going to set levels and let them go. So let's see what they sound like with the drums. I think I'm going to change the panning though. When I play, the high is on the left. Since we're doing drummer perspective, the low is on the right, so I've got them backwards. So I'm going to move this over. Or am I? Let's see which one is doing what here. Okay, I did have it right. Uh-oh, my dogs are barking. I'm only going to put these at about 15. Again, that stereo imager is going to make a huge difference. So let's bring them back in and see what it sounds like. Okay, I'm good with that. So we're going to move on to this bass and get this bass working with these drums, and then I'm going to stop this video, and then this will be part one, and I haven't decided on what genre to call this yet, but it'll be part one, mixing drums on this song, which is it's a song by Chad Hollister. Chad Hollister band is called Eyes. So I'll make it real easy to find both of them on YouTube once I got it all done. So let's take a listen to this bass guitar, and it specifically says right on it, it's a DI. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I am going to go to Ampire. I don't care what anybody says. I like using Ampire on bass. Just under distortion, Ampire. And the first thing I'm going to do is go over here, and I'm going to switch it to my bass amp. I'm going to change the speakers over to either a 4x10 or a 2x10 cabinet. But I'm going to go ahead and try the 10. Let's see what this sounds like now. Man, that is a little loud. Sorry about that. I should have had that turned down. I'm a little distracted from my phone ringing in there. Okay. Boy, that's got a lot of distortion. I don't like that at all. Let me try a different cab first. Wow, has that one really got that much distortion? Yep, let's take the drive out of it. All right. Here we go. And I'm going to leave the rest of this straight across the board. Let me check what the stomps are doing. I don't need reverb on my bass. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave these flat across the board because I prefer to use my own compression and EQ. So I'm going to go to my dynamics, bring in my compressor, and then go to my mixing, bring in my EQ, and take a look. But let's start with compressor here. I'm going to bring this up to about 3.3 to 1. I'm going to have a little bit, I'm going to have this hit at about 90-ish, 8-ish on the attack. And I'm going to have the release up to about 4, between 4 and 500. And I'm going to pull off of this threshold a bit. Okay, now let's take a look at this EQ. Now don't forget, we built the drum set, you know, over here in the 50, really no more up into the 150 hertz area. I mean, that was just in the toms. So first thing I'm going to do is roll this, and I'm going to probably do a 24. And this thing has all kinds of lows in it. I'm going to put a 12 dB shelf. What that's going to do is you can hear the fingers, but you got to be careful that when he clamps down with his left hand, you can hear the strings hit the frets. So we don't want that. Okay, for now, let's bring in the drums and see how they're working together here. Oh, there's got to be another setting on Ampire here. I just don't want that much distortion in it. I only have the one preset for bass. Let's try the different channel. Let me go ahead and solo that again. Oh, that one's better. All right, there we go. I'm a little more happy with that. Now let's bring everything back in. All right, this is going to be one of those times where I pull off my headphones and listen to in studio monitors, so give me 1 second here. I got my talkback mic is here. It's right here, so I am going to turn that off for a second and I'm going to listen to this in studio monitors. Don't want to make a mistake that I've made in the past and then have you guys hear thin mixes and think that's the way it's supposed to be. So 1 second. All right, thanks for that. Yep, I had to make some changes that I just couldn't hear in the headphones. Again, do not mix in headphones. These are decent headphones. They're the Sennheiser 280 HD 280 Pros. So they're not the best out there. I mean, you know, they're great for $100 headphones. I do use them a lot. They're closed back. That's another reason why you really should mix on them. You want to do a semi-open back if you're going to use it for mixing, but I've gotten real used to these. But anyway, this sounds pretty good. Let me turn our bongos back on and kind of see what that sounds like now. Turn some of that reverb down. Got real nice kick bass response. I love it when they work well together. All right, I think that gives you a pretty good idea of how I mix these drums. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off, and then I'll start working on part 2. I'll post them both at the same time, so once you get done with one, the other one will be there. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you guys shortly. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Please, please. Let me switch this over. And there's me. Got these crazy lights over top of me. Anyway, again, thanks for stopping by. We got these drums and bass all worked out. We're going to come back and we're going to finish the rest of the song in video 2. And I'm looking forward to it. And I hope to see you guys there then. Take care and see you later.